Now, the actor, Griff Rhys-Jones, says he's thinking of moving abroad if Labour wins the election and introduces the mansion tax. In an interview for the Daily Telegraph, the TV star, who lives in central London, described the idea of a levy on properties worth more than £2 million as fatuous. And he's not the only London resident who doesn't like the idea. Here's the Labour MP and mayoral hopeful, David Lammy, speaking to me yesterday on the Sunday Politics.
In the end, a property tax, great. But actually, let's just reform council tax and have the money actually come back into London. I think that's what some Labour members are saying, and that's my view.
Have you told Ed Miliband?
I've told Ed Balls twice over the last short while. I think it's good that he's moved to make it clear you can defer and to have bans within the mansion tax. But the bottom line is I want the money to come back to London, not to go to the Treasury and get spent in other parts of the country.
Because you really couldn't win the... Right, well, that was David Lammy, who wants to stand for mayor in London. And joining me now is the Labour leader from Kensington and Chelsea Council, Emma Dent Coad. Welcome to the Daily Politics. What's the problem with Ed Miliband's mansion tax?
Well, I think that to start with, I think it's been very, very poorly communicated. There's a lot of scaremongering going on, and we have residents, we're out knocking on doors twice a week at the moment. We have residents who are losing sleep because they've been told, they've read some ridiculous article saying they're going to lose £27,000 a year, and that's rubbish, actually. It's maybe a couple of hundred, you know, at tops if their home's worth between 2 and 3 million. But what some people don't understand is the huge inequalities in my borough. There's a lot of misunderstandings about that. We have some very, very poor people. Some may be living in council homes, and their banding has gone up and up and up over time. But we also have the ridiculously rich, and the mansion tax, as currently proposed, is not going to hit the people that we need to hit in Kensington and Chelsea. They have their whole teams of tax advisors. They're going to avoid it. A lot of them have bought property through companies, and they won't be charged at all. So they're going to slip through the net. So there are maybe other places like that, but Kensington and Chelsea is a microcosm of the problems with the mansion tax as proposed now.
Right, it's been miscommunicated, communicated very poorly. It's not going to hit the right people. It's a bad idea.
Well, I think we need to reform council tax, because this is where it comes from. I have no problem with wealth that people have accrued rather than earned through the sweat of their brow being taxed, actually, because I think in the end in London we benefit, a lot of people benefit from that. But we have a gap. If you can live in a property worth £320,000 and be in the same council tax band as someone in a £2 million property, that is unjust. That's what has got to be solved. And I do think that there are issues, and it's certainly much more of a London tax than it is anywhere else. And I do think we need to look at the overall picture. And
do you support this policy as it stands by Ed Balls?
I support the principle of taxing that unearned growth in income. But I do think that there is a big gap between 2 million and the current council tax. And I think you can't do it on its own. I think you have to do it as part of council. I agree with David Lammy.
Is it right, though, that in Emma's constituency, people are lying awake worrying about this policy at night, and not necessarily people who are as well off as the mansion tax is designed to hit?
Unfortunately, the reality of being, especially this close to a general election, is that there will be scaremongering going on for all sorts of political reasons around the election. And that scaremongering about, I mean, if people would lie awake at night, and I don't blame them, if they think they have to suddenly find £27,000 a year, and that's not the case. And I think it's really important that we make sure we communicate that, but also that actually, you know, the media has also play their role in communicating what the actual policy is. But I do think, as London MPs, we're certainly lobbying to make sure that we see what we think is a better way of implementing, but we agree with the principle.
Right, you agree with the principle?
I agree with the principle, certainly. People who have more should pay more, and people should have less should pay less.
But you say as it's designed now, it's going to hit the wrong people.
It is going to hit the wrong people at the moment. I mean, we have a situation where we have Mrs Braithwaite in North Kensington who has a 3-bed council flat. She pays £10 a week less than Sultan of Brunei, who has a genuine mansion, a proper mansion, that people will recognise as a mansion in Kensington Gardens.
That cannot be right, can it? But, you know, your party is never going to back a mansion tax. You're the party of hedge funds and millionaires, as Labour would put it, not me. And you'll never support a tax on assets.
I don't think we will ever support a mansion tax, but I think we might well support a reform of local government taxation in a way that makes it more equitable. What is noticeable about this is that actually it's been trotted out by Ed Miliband, although a vast number of senior members of his own party actually disagree with it. And there are specific problems with it as well, which is, it's not going to hit anyone in Herefordshire. These are numbers way off the scale, you know, from my county and my constituency. But there are parts of the country where, you know, it will make a huge difference whether you're earning potentially very small amounts of money that would make you eligible for it or not, or eligible eligible to have to pay it up front or not. And that's a very serious poor design in the tax.
Right, and I've noticed the Liberal Democrats aren't calling it or mansion tax now. They're calling it a council tax re-evaluation because it's actually going to hit people in London who have family homes, isn't it?
Well, we have actually changed the way that we think that it should work. We've, from my understanding, Danny Alexander has spoken to the Treasury about the most effective way that you could actually do what I think certainly Meg and Emma and I probably think needs to happen, which is actually ensuring that those who do have very, very huge amounts of personal wealth do actually pay their fair share. The best way to do it is to have effectively more bands on council tax, so that you are taking money from those who have very, very large,
so a massive re-evaluation of council tax, which is
no,
not
we're
what
not talking about having a re-evaluation of council tax. We're talking about having extra bands at the top for those properties that are worth significant amounts of money.
Right, but in terms of what Ed Balls is suggesting, there is still going to be the case that someone with a house worth over £2 million will be taxed under your so-called mansion tax policy, but a landlord with 5, 10 houses worth £1 million won't be.
Well, no, because we're talking about we're not so much talking about landlords. There's a whole different area around private
but if you're a
landlords.
property owner and you have 3 or 4 houses that are worth under £2 million, you will not pay a mansion tax. Arguably, you have a much bigger property portfolio than the person with one house of 2.
But I think that's a false argument, because currently,
Is that fair?
No, currently, if you rent a property, whether you rent it from the council or you rent it from a private landlord, you pay the council tax. You know, it's the householder who pays the council tax, whoever the ownership. So we have, you know, Hackney's not quite, prices are going up, but there are parts of London, I imagine Kensington and Chelsea is one of them, where you live in a council property and you're paying very high council tax, even though you don't own the asset. Exactly. So I think it's about actually taxing the asset. And there are different issues around private landlords, and we need to have that's a whole other debate, really, about how we manage that sector.
But it hasn't yet really been thought through, and that's the point, isn't it?
That is the point.
I mean,
we're all
putting
up whatever comes through. I mean, you know, we're listening to people on the doorstep who are very upset about, for example, property speculators buying properties and then bubble wrapping them, and they can make £2,000 a week just on the increase of the value of their property without ever putting a tenant in there. And that kind of thing needs to be involved. And the current proposals won't tackle that at all. And Kensington and Chelsea is being swamped by this kind of development, where people will buy several properties and bubble wrap them and leave them there. And, you know, we can't do that. People are playing Monopoly. They're using them as poker chips, and some of it's dirty money. We don't want that. We want families living there who can afford to live there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for coming on to the programme.